What is the most unexplainable thing you've ever personally witnessed? I was hungover yesterday morning. I didn't drink to excess. I didn't think anyway. But I suppose part of getting older is feeling the mighty bodily harm half a dozen Bud Lights can impart on our frail bodies. Splitting headache. Queasy. 4 Advil and a coffee is usually enough to right the ship. There is one left in the bottle. Son of a bitch. My wife and I talked and decided I'll take a trip to the shores down the street and get Advil. And a few other things we happen to need. So I hop in the car with my list and the sun is making things 1000% worse. But I've made this bed for myself and so I will happily lay in it. At the store. I've grabbed milk. Backup Folgers. The Advil. And I decide my wife might like some fruit with her breakfast. I am looking at Granny Smith apples when I notice something out of the corner of my eye. A man with no eyes. This motherfucker had no eyes. Totally by himself. Navigating the store. You know how an old lady's mouth looks when she doesn't have her false teeth in? It was like that. Twice on his face. I looked him in the face. He appeared to look at me. I put an apple in the bag. Is he going to ask me something? I wondered. And then deftly diffused the situation by looking at my phone like a jackass and walking away awkwardly. He ended up being ahead of me in line to check out. His speech was garbled and strained. He only had a few items. I have absolutely no idea how he managed this. I got a coffee this morning. Dunkin's. Sitting in one of the booths. Drinking a coffee and looking at a newspaper? No eye guy. TLDR, might be in an X-Files episode. Will report back if still alive at end of the week. When I was 15 I was babysitting for a family in my village. It was about 1 in the morning and I was walking the 10 minutes home. The roads were completely empty and everything was completely quiet. I'd done this walk in the dark loads of times so I wasn't scared. I heard a noise which sounded exactly like a bicycle on the road being ridden really fast. Sound carries at night in the countryside so it was quite loud. I looked up but saw no bike. The sound got louder and louder and then went right past me but there was nothing there. I was terrified and ran the rest of the way home. Still no idea to this day what it could have been. Listening to a song in my headphones out in public. It was a song by Eminem. I see a car passing by and one of the passengers in the car looks right into my eyes and starts rapping the lyrics to the song that I was listening to with perfect timing. I just look at him all confused and as the car drove off. He was still going on and gave me a wink as the car took off. I just sat there. Contemplating on what had actually happened and then I was like what the fuck. Edit. No. I was not on the radio. I was listening to music stored on my iPod. I was somewhere between 8 and 11. With my mom and dad spending the night at my grandmother's house. What I recollect of one particular night is laying my head on the pillow. Closing my eyes. Opening them almost immediately. And it was morning. I had no dream recollection. Or of waking in the middle of the night to roll over or pee or whatever. Nothing. I was well rested so I know I slept. I'm sure it was some sort of brain-induced illusion, as opposed to, say, time travel. But it was weird. Edit. Based on the number of Me Too posts. I can only conclude that we were victims of some sort of alien abduction. They zapped us with a sleep ray. Took us and performed, insert humorous alien probe reference here, on us. Then they returned us to our beds and zapped us with a wake ray. The sleep ray inhibits dreams. As I remember it. When I was about 5 years old. I was laying in bed. Staring at my nightlight as I tried to go to sleep. It was a standard nightlight. Just a base with a bulb out the top that you'd plug into the outlet. The shadow was always cast straight down beneath the base. This particular night. I watched in horror as the shadow rotate 360 around the nightlight. Coming to rest again directly below the base. I freaked the fuck out and was terrified. Even 5-year-old me knew that was impossible. A few years ago. I was driving home from work. Home was in the country. It was about 1 AM. It's a straight line. So I know there are no cars whatsoever. To the left and the dead tree line. I saw flashing lights. Red and blue. I could see miles in every direction. There was no one. I got out of my car to change my perspective and maybe explain this. The lights were still there. I didn't see their origin. It's like they had none. Red. Blue. Red. Blue. The top of 25 feet trees. Very strange. This will definitely be buried. But fuck it. When I was 12, my extended family went on a Caribbean cruise. On the last night, my cousins and I were doing our typical running about. And for whatever reason wanted to take the elevator down a few floors to cause trouble somewhere else. So we press the down button. The elevator comes and we get in. But instead of taking us down, it takes us a few floors up. Stupid elevator. So we stay inside to press the floor that we want again. This time it takes us down past the floor that we want. To the below deck section where only personnel go. Where equipment is stored. And where you typically need an elevator key thing to access. Of course we think this is awesome and get out. Commenting on how strange it is and how much you can really feel the motion of the boat down there. Then. I swear to God. It seemed as though the wheels of a bellhop trolley that was stored down there fucking shifted 90 degrees. Straightening out and the trolley started to roll. We promptly got the hell out of there. Back to the elevator. Which finally decided to cooperate. I'm sure this can all be chalked up to a faulty elevator. And the motion of the boat. But at the time it felt ridiculously odd and creepy. When I was in my teens, we lived in a house that gave me the heebie-jeebies. Not horrible. Just an uneasy feeling. Sometimes at night the bed would shake. This happened about 4 or 5 times. Not a huge shaking that threw me out of bed, but enough to wake me up completely and experience it for enough minutes to know it was happening. I don't miss that house. About a year ago, my sister's hamster got out of its cage on the top floor of our house and it was nowhere to be found. After a week we chalked it up to death by cat. Yet 6 months later my mom and I are talking upstairs in her room one afternoon and we hear and feel this sonic boom. It shook her picture frames and was so loud we thought the hot water tank exploded. We raced downstairs to nothing. Everything was fine and still. I look down into the front door foyer and what do I find? My sister's hamster just sniffing around in the corner like nothing's up. Can't to this day figure out what that sound was or where the hamster had been hiding all those months. A running gag in the house now is the hamster is a time traveler that finally found his way home. I don't believe in the paranormal. But to this day I have no explanation for this. One day I was sitting on the couch watching TV with my dog. She was laying still. Then suddenly perked up and started growling at the corner of the room to the left of the TV. Suddenly, she snapped her head toward the right as though she was tracking something moving fast across the room. As her field of vision passed the TV, a clock on top of the set fell off as though it were knocked off. It happened when I was 16. I'm 26 now and still really want to know what the fuck could have caused it. At the age of 16, a group of friends and I ventured to an abandoned campground to drink and carouse. The grounds included a giant mess hall building with a fireplace big enough inside to burn 2 couches. We threw everything we could find in that fireplace, don't worry. The mess hall was very well ventilated, having no glass in the windows and various holes, and proceeded to listen to Pearl Jam and have a good time. At around 3 AM. Some people are asleep. But 3 of us are still chilling out and watching the fire. We had run out of booze long ago. And it was a bit too cold to sleep unless you were really drunk. As we sat there watching the pile of burned out garbage flicker and smolder, the fire suddenly started to turn green. That's not unheard of. So nobody reacted, assuming it was just some chemical surfacing on some of the garbage. In the next few moments, a roughly head-sized lump began to form in the center of the fire. It resolved itself into a face and began to make speaking motions and grimace and smile, but without making any noise other than the crackling of the fire. After 2 minutes or so, it collapsed into ash. At that point, the few conscious members of our crew looked at each other, aghast, and said the usual things. What was that? Did you see? What the fuck? Double quote. It was very clearly a head made of ash. We had multiple people witness it. It very clearly coalesced out of a pile of garbage. Pretended to or tried to speak. And then dissipated. I really have no explanation for it at all. As a kid growing up in the rural parts of South Carolina, my family and I would sit outside at night and enjoy the air, talk, and look with wonder into the night sky. One night my mom's twin sister directed our attention to the sky. There we saw what can only be described as the underbelly of a plane. It had 2 or 3 lights on the bottom. It just hovered there. Strangely enough, most planes don't hover. The ones that do are exceedingly loud. I found out the truth to that as a Marine on Camp Pendleton, CA. When the Harriers arrived, this vessel just hung in the air. Silently. Lights flashing. I forgot all about it until after a year or so of listening to Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell and calling him and his callers lunatics. Then I realized I saw the same thing. Naturally, I no longer call people crazy because of my own experiences. This one time I went to a cheap palm reader, tarot card, whatever else psychics claim to do on the boardwalk just for fun. The lady proceeded to tell me that the breakup I was going through would get better for me, but that I shouldn't get back with him when he came back around. This was seemingly generic advice. But she also told me the name of my ex and that the guy I was rebounding with right now was trouble. She also gave me his name correctly. It was such a strange feeling that she could accurately tell me all these things about my life. And I really didn't feel like I gave her any leads. I was alone. So none of my friends could have given her any clues either. It was so strange. Too bad this will get buried. It's good or one. I have a couple actually. But this one baffles me to this day. I used to live in an old house in Salem, MA. All kinds of weird shit happened there. But one time when we were having some friends over, the upstairs bathroom locked itself from the inside with no one in it. It had the kind of locks where you slide the bolt through the slot. It has 2 doors, as one you could access from the hall and one from my bedroom. Both locked themselves. There was no one in the bathroom. We had to kick the door open to get in. When we did, empty. Window closed. It was painted shut. Lights on. It was physically impossible for this kind of lock to operate it unless someone was inside that room. The hair on the back of my neck is standing up just thinking about it. All the guests were downstairs in the living room. Everyone was accounted for. The house had a mysterious fire about a year later that forced us to move out. It started, according to the FD, behind a couch where there were no wires, outlets or anything. They could never determine the cause. Still don't understand how it even happened. I mean, I understand the physics behind it. But anyway. Back in high school, my friend and I were walking behind my house. Mind you, I live in Illinois, so it's really fucking flat. We had this plastic pipe running from the gutter spout so that the limestone path wouldn't get washed away during rainstorms. I'm talking to my friend behind me, not paying attention, and I trip over the pipe. The whole world starts spinning. I then find myself walking forward like I was before. My friend was behind me, laughing really hard. Apparently, I did a full front flip and landed on my feet, and the momentum was enough that it sent me back into walking again. I still cannot understand how I got enough speed to do a full flip and then land on my feet. I have magic slugs. They'll leave a trail that starts and ends in the middle of a room. Occasionally I'll actually see one. Once I had wet feet on a solid floor and left a footprint. I took 2 steps, turned back, and there was a slug in my footprint. I was not stepping on it. There was no trail from outside the footprint. Edit. Actually, I'll change my answer. My grandparents have a place on a remote stretch of coast. I was over there with my cousin one time and we'd gone for a walk along the rocks. Something came zipping up in the water to where we were really fast. A circle that had 3 evenly spaced spots on the outside that were bubbling. Only thing we could see was this dark disc giving off the bubbles. It was there for about 20-30 seconds. Then just took off back out to sea. I don't believe in or psychics or anything. But there's this thing that happens to me that I can't quite explain. I'm sure there's some actual reason it happens. Like some biological perception or psychology shit. But anyway. Here it is. I'll just be going about my day. Doing whatever. Then I'll get this fuzzy feeling in my head and stomach. Everything seems to slow down around me. Or maybe my thoughts come faster as usual. I'll think I dreamed this. Then I'll start narrating. In my mind. What's going to happen before it happens. It's always really mundane things and it only lasts a few seconds. I posted this before but it got buried. I'm hoping someone sees it this time. It was about 9 PM in early February. So it was well past sundown. I was driving south on a 2-lane road. Going up a slight hill. I was approaching a T intersection with a red light. There was no snow on the ground at the time. I live in the Chicago suburbs. As I drove, suddenly there was a column of greenish brilliant light shooting up into the sky. I was just about to crest the hill and thought, from the placement of this light column, that perhaps the red light had exploded. But no, the rational side of me knew it was no explosion. It went so high into the sky that it reminded me of lightning in reverse. It also reminded me of a searchlight but was far too brilliant and strangely colored for a searchlight. It lasted for about 3 seconds. It baffled me so much that I posted on Craigslist asking if anyone had seen this, and one person from my area responded saying he had also seen it but had no idea what it was. My mom was getting ready to go in for a minor surgery when she realized that she was still wearing her wedding ring. Which you aren't supposed to do. So she took it off and left it in the center console in my dad's car. She was out of it for a while and she did tell me to remind her to get it out of the car. But I also forgot because I'm a shitty rememberer. A week later, I realized and went to look for it. I couldn't find it in the center console. So I told her she should go look since she knows exactly where she put it. She couldn't find it either. We thought that maybe my dad had forgotten as well and maybe cleaned out his car. Nope, or at least he wouldn't admit to it. So we were stumped and quite upset. 3 years passed and my mom was without her wedding ring. Which isn't a huge issue in our family. But I felt bad for not remembering in time to save it, and my mom felt bad for ever putting it in such a place to lose it, and my dad didn't feel bad, but we both thought that maybe he accidentally threw it out with trash or something. He's more absent-minded than either of us. If that is possible. We were taking some china out of china cabinet that we hadn't touched since we moved in 8 years before. I took down a teacup in the farthest top corner and my mom's wedding ring was in it. It was dusty and bent. But there it was. We kind of looked at each other and didn't know what to say. Still not sure. Our cars are parked a good 20 feet from the front of the house. On the street. And this china cabinet is in the kitchen at the back of the house. I guess we just got a whatever. Got the ring back agreement. I was on my way home from the gym when I saw a woman being mauled by a huge dog. It had to be at least 120 pounds. There were a bunch of people standing around watching it happen. There were 2 people trying to get the dog off of her with no success. I went up to the dog and stood right over him. I wrapped my arms around his body and lifted him right up off the ground. I'm guessing the shock of being lifted made them let go of the lady. Then as hard as I could I tossed the dog and I stood ready to fight this damn thing because it was going to go after me right after he hit the ground. It didn't. It just took off for owner. Now this is the weird part. I thought the owner of this dog was just some innocent bystander. The whole time that guy was there he did absolutely nothing. He said absolutely nothing to the dog. He stood perfectly still and watched that dog maul that lady. But when the cops got there he said, "Oh, I did everything I could to stop that dog." And of course he blamed the lady, saying she aggravated the attack. I was screaming at the top of my lungs, "You fucking liar." To the point where the police threatened to arrest me. No criminal charges were laid and the lady who got mauled settled out of court for a ridiculously small amount of money. I was told it wasn't more than a couple of $100. I would have sued that bastard for every penny he had. In 06 I worked the night shift at an electronics plant. Lunch was around 3 AM and one night I decided to go home to eat instead of paying $9 for a plate of subpar cafeteria food. I made some ramen and put on The Exorcism of Emily Rose. I didn't have cable or internet back then, so DVDs were my only form of entertainment. The movie got to the really scary part where the devil is talking through her in the barn. And suddenly I heard a loud click. I looked over and my bedside lamp had turned itself on. This was a $5 student desk lamp from Walmart with a twist style switch. The switch was very stiff and took quite a bit of force to turn. There's no way a breeze or temperature expansion could have caused it to turn by itself, plus my house was kept at a constant temperature anyway. I also lived alone, so there's no way it was rigged as a prank either. I can think of literally no explanation for this that does not involve the supernatural. I doubt that the movie had anything to do with it. But it sure added to the scariness. After it happened, I put my bowl down and ran the hell out of that house. This wasn't the only spooky incident that happened there either. I fully believe that house was undergoing an active haunting while I lived there. About a year ago I thought my boyfriend had died. About 2 weeks after. Almost every night my hand would feel really cold and there would be a breeze from nowhere. Followed by sort of tingles on my side as if someone was laying next to me. At first I was freaked out, but then it was comforting. About a month later I found out that the entire time I thought he was gone. He was in a coma after his failed suicide attempt. He told me he had dreams of visiting me, laying with me, holding my hand and listening to me. To this day I still can't explain it. A few years ago we had a string of pretty crazy thunderstorms that passed by over the course of a couple weeks. I enjoyed hanging out on our family's back patio and watching the resulting lighting that came from the storms. One night, while the rain was coming down, the entire storm started to light up. At first I thought it was just a rapid succession of lightning strikes. But it just didn't stop. It just kept flashing brightly. It gets weirder. The sky starts flashing blue, green, and red. Like someone was shining a massive strobe light across the entire sky. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me at that point. But then I called my parents outside and they saw it too. You'd think it would have stopped there. But it gets even better. Eventually, a strange shape appeared in the sky. It was barely visible between the sheets of rain. But, to best explain it, it looked like a massive spinning rave light in the sky. It flashed red, green, blue, white. It just sat there, spinning and lighting up the sky. I know this sounds like the dumbest fucking thing ever. But this did happen. I have literally no fucking clue what it could have been. Transformer popping? Crazy rave thunderstorm enthusiast neighbor? No idea. But I can say with 100% assurance that it was the strangest fucking thing I've ever seen. I couldn't find my glasses once. And even after asking my mom to use her mom powers to find them, they remained lost. So I did the most logical thing and said out loud something like, "Goblins, if you give me back my glasses, you can have anything you want from the pantry and the fridge." Then I go to the kitchen. And there they were. My glasses. Sitting innocently on top of the microwave oven. And I'm telling you, black frames on top of white appliance. There was no way my mom and I could have missed them before. The mother got scared. I just love my goblins. When I lived alone in my first apartment, there was a small shelf next to the door. I used to leave my keys on it every day. One day, I was about to leave and could not find my keys. They were not on the shelf. I searched the shelf, around the shelf, on the floor, the entire apartment, several times. Then, I thought, okay, I'll retrace my steps. I opened the door and stepped into the hall. Then I stepped back in and said, okay. I'd put my keys on the shelf. Here. And placed my hand on the shelf. Right. On the keys. My brother is 4 years older. My sister 1/2 years older but with disabilities. We all rode the same school bus. I was in probably 5th grade this day. We come home. My parents at work. And we hear this absolutely terrible loud noise coming from inside our home. My house is 2 stories. and the top half under construction. My dad built it himself. Open the door and the house is vibrating. The entire thing. Scared to leave my brother's side, we all head towards the sound, which is upstairs. There's a belt sander on the floor. It had sanded partially through the plywood floor, but at this point was lying with the sanding part up, just wiggling across the floor. That alone was strange. How did it flip? Nobody has been home since we left. Then my brother went to unplug it. It was not plugged in, nor had battery backup. He freaked and kicked it, and it stopped. He threw it out the window into the yard. My dad doesn't believe us, but I know. We both saw it. That fucker was not plugged in but was going full speed. Late to the party. But this literally just happened about 10 minutes ago and I have to tell this story. So I work in a distribution center on second shift sorting. I start at 4 and stop at 12:30. But I live an hour away, so if I speed like hell I can get home in 45 minutes. As I walk into my home, I have two choices. I can either go straight to bed, or put my keys away in the kitchen. I decide to put my keys away. And as I'm rounding the corner into the kitchen I see my father. He's in his bathrobes with wet hair and a Hostess cupcake in his mouth. Not bitten through, mind you, but just hanging in his mouth. I say hi, but then I realize that he's still asleep. What is this? I don't even. This may freak someone out, but yesterday I was on Reddit for 3 full hours with no problems using Internet Explorer. Good speed and all. For my serious response. This freaked me out, and still makes me refuse to use the bathroom at night. I've alternatively used bottles. I was out in the forest behind my home. It was getting dark, so I started heading back. I hear 2 huge crashes, and not a beater behind me. 2 massive trees fell perpendicular, barely missing me. I wasn't sure how to react. I ran home and didn't say anything cause no one would buy it. I go into the bathroom, and the mirror is shattered, like a web shatter, and my reflection looked like I was crying. So I did my business, turn around, and suddenly I was smiling. No matter what I did, I never frowned. I ask my mom about the mirror, and she just looks at me. She quickly tells me it's nothing, and goes back to her show. Next morning, mirror is fine. I go out to the forest. Trees weren't there. And the thing that scared me most out of all of this is that my dad had that bathroom locked for a month. And we weren't allowed in the forest anymore. The next week our neighbor disappears. Police called and all. The next morning, it was all normal again. As if it never happened. Freaks me out so bad. This happened in 6th grade in middle school. I was eating my cereal in the morning like I always do. I usually have another half hour before I have to leave. But today I was early and had about 45 minutes instead. My mom walks in the kitchen. We have a short conversation, all while I'm still eating my cereal at the same speed. Then we both look at the clock simultaneously. We had a 5-minute chat. But I now had not 40 minutes before I had to go to school. I had 5. We both stared at the clock for a second, then checked the time throughout the house really quick. We had lost a half hour, and my brother hasn't even woken up yet, which he was supposed to do in about 10 minutes originally. At this point I've got 4 minutes not only to get me ready to leave, but to get my brother ready to leave too. There hasn't been an explanation as of yet. Ghost story time. So, my mom has a 1965 convertible Mustang and me and my friends were driving with her through the countries to get scared at night. Probably around 15 years old. We pulled into this cemetery at night to put the hood up as it was getting cold. In the distance we saw this weird light floating across the horizon. It wasn't at a walking pace like someone holding a lantern, but floating. About a minute later my mom's dashboard lights start going crazy. On a 1965 Mustang you can't control dash lights without turning off the headlights. On top of that my mom's hands were in the air. I guess that my mom had bad experiences there before. I'm not one for paranormal activities or believing in them, but that shit was fucked. I was 18. Playing manhunt, tag, with some friends at a local recreational complex. It had a small playground area which had a large metal slide about 10 feet tall. Above the slide was a cover, acting like a sort of roof, which came to a point like a spire. He had decided to wrap himself around the edge of the spire and cling to the edges as a clever hiding spot. Apparently, his grip was weakening just as the other friend who was it approached the playground. He clung on silently until his hands simply had no strength. I had been hiding about 40 yards away near some bleachers when I saw him fall. He fell about 10-12 feet, with his back toward the ground to be met by a metal bar about 3 inches in diameter which was above a much smaller slide. It was then that I witnessed his back bend to the point where he kicked himself in the back of the head. His back looked like it folded in half. He then flung off the bar and hit the ground. We all thought we just watched our friend get paralyzed or worse. He laid there motionless for about 10 seconds, as a bluff, then got up and made it to base safely as if he had somehow planned the whole thing. He hadn't, to this day. None of us can understand how he got up from that without so much as a bruise to show. My stepsister, 18 years old. Stepmother and I, 12 years old, were in the kitchen when a ceramic figurine flew off of a shelf at head height 6-8 ft away directly at me. It reached the space where my head was and dropped straight to the ground and shattered. We all just stood there completely stunned for what seemed like around 5 minutes. My stepsister and I still talk about it. That house sucked. The alarm went off by itself all the time. I was always blamed for this. We would find cabinet doors open all the time, also blamed on me. The door chime would sound anywhere between the hours of 1 AM to 4 AM. So this happened about 8 years ago in my ex-girlfriend's parents' house. It's a very old house, and at one time had a heating stove in the basement. It still has a coal room in the basement that always was ominously shut. My ex grew up in the house, and said she'd always had paranormal experiences. But she was prone to fantasy, and I honestly thought she was probably just misinterpreting things. We were in her kitchen, which was near but not exactly above that basement. I was tickling her, and had her in a bit of a grip, and she was laughing and yelling stop. This went on for a little while. But the next thing you know, the same words were being mimicked from the basement, but at a delay that couldn't directly make it an echo. Also, my voice standing next to her was not echoing. Also, the very strange thing was, the best I can describe it, it was like someone was doing a very good imitation of her from the basement. The emotional pitch wasn't quite perfect. When we finally noticed it happening, we both got really wide-eyed and quite scared. I started to make noises from the exact spot to see if it would happen with me. Nope. I yelled down the basement, "Hello? Anyone down there?" And that's when the voice echo stopped. We then tried to make more noises again from the spot we were in but were unsuccessful at having any echo repetition of mine or her voice. I finally got the balls to check down there, but nobody was there. After that day, my beautifully eccentric ex named the ghost a female name and would talk to it every time she had to go down into the basement by herself. Mostly because she doesn't like the idea of it being lonely. She still thinks it lives in the old coal room. I still sometimes miss those kinds of sweet eccentricities about her. One summer evening, myself and 2 friends were smoking weed at a local park. We were all lying on the bonnet of my mom's car staring up at the clear night sky. There were lots of stars visible, but one in particular caught our attention. It appeared to be moving, not in a predictable, straight line sort of way, but in random squiggly sort of lines. After 30 seconds or so it appeared to shoot off into the distance. Slightly freaked out, and questioning the quality of the weed, we tried to work out what it might have been when a few minutes later it reappeared, performed the same squiggly movements and again rapidly vanished as before. It didn't reappear a third time and I've never been able to explain what it might have been.